The night was calm, yet James's heart refused to follow its rhythm. From his small apartment window, he could see the city lights stretching endlessly across the horizon, a glittering mosaic of ambition, wealth, and dreams. It was a view he once called his own. Years ago, those same lights had meant everything to him: power, recognition, the satisfaction of having built something larger than himself. Back then, success felt eternal. But now, standing there in the dim quiet of a rented room, they looked like stars from another universe, beautiful, unreachable, and painfully distant. Behind him came a soft sound: laughter. It was faint but steady, the kind of laughter that wrapped around a weary heart and made it ache in the best and worst ways. Diep was sitting on the floor, helping their little niece, Nhi, stack wooden blocks into a tower that leaned dangerously to one side. Her voice, gentle, patient, humming an old lullaby, filled the air like warmth filling a cold room. That sound, that warmth, it was home. James turned and watched them for a long time. In that moment, he saw not just two people, but everything he had ever longed for: simplicity, peace, love without pretense. Yet, buried beneath that tenderness was an ache he couldn't quiet. For so many years, he had believed that love and career could walk side by side. That one could build an empire without losing the people who gave it meaning. But life had proven him wrong. Earlier that day, he had received an offer. Not just any offer, but the kind of offer that could change everything. A foreign company wanted him to lead a billion-dollar project. The sort of opportunity most people would kill for. It promised redemption, prestige, the chance to reclaim the reputation he had lost after his company's collapse. But there was one condition: he would have to move abroad, for years, no distractions. No family, no visits, no Diep, no Nhi, no home. He remembered sitting across from the board that afternoon, smiling politely as they spoke about figures and forecasts. He had nodded in all the right places, asked the expected questions. But deep down, he already knew, this was not a business decision. This was a moral one. A test of who he was, and what he was willing to lose again. When he returned home, Diep noticed immediately the heaviness in his shoulders, the stillness in his gaze. "Are you tired?" she asked softly, wiping her hands after feeding Nhi. James smiled faintly. A little. It was a long day. She didn't press further. She never did. Diep had learned to read the spaces between his silences, the pauses that spoke of battles he couldn't name. Instead, she walked over, handed him a bowl of warm soup, and said, "Eat before it gets cold." Her hands were rough from work, her apron stained, but her eyes held the kind of calm no fortune could buy. James watched Nhi crawl into her lap, laughing, and something broke quietly inside him. He realized then that he stood at a crossroads again. One path glittered with promise. The other, quiet, small, was built from love. Society would tell him to choose success. Men like him were expected to climb endlessly, to never look back. But every time he imagined that gleaming office abroad, all he saw was Diep and Nhi fading from view, like ghosts lost in the distance. That night, when the two of them slept, James sat alone at the table. The contract lay open before him, its ink gleaming faintly under the flickering light. He could almost hear his father's voice echoing in his mind. "Don't be a fool, James. Family doesn't pay the bills." He wanted to argue, but the old voice was part of him now, woven into his fears. Then his eyes landed on a small piece of paper, a crayon drawing Nhi had made that afternoon. Three stick figures, Mommy, Uncle James, and Nhi, standing under a big yellow sun. Beneath it, in crooked, uneven letters, she had written, "Me, Mommy, and Uncle James. Happy forever." James's vision blurred. His hand trembled. He picked up a pen, not to sign the contract, but to write a letter. A letter that would change everything. By morning, the world looked soft again. The light filtered gently through thin curtains, painting golden streaks across the room. Diep was already awake, humming while she packed Nhi's school bag. James stood in the doorway, memorizing her every movement. The way her hair fell loose over her shoulder. The faint tune she always hummed when she was at peace. He hadn't slept. The letter, folded neatly in his jacket pocket, felt heavier than stone. All night, he had written and rewritten it, each line a confession, each word a wound. After breakfast, he kissed Nhi on the forehead. "Be good today, okay?" She giggled, holding his face between her tiny hands. "Uncle James, are you sad?" He froze. Then smiled. "No, sweetheart. Just thinking about Mommy." She teased him, and the three of them laughed. But only one of them knew that laughter was hiding a goodbye. Later that afternoon, while the sun burned soft behind clouds, James walked into the small garden behind their house. The air smelled of earth and daisies, Diep's favorite. He picked one carefully, tucked it into the envelope with his letter, and placed it gently beside her sewing machine. Then he stood there, taking in everything. The half-finished embroidery, the worn wooden chairs. The family photo they had taken last spring. Every inch of that small space was filled with love, not luxury, but presence. Diep, he whispered to the empty room. You and Nhi deserve peace. Not a man haunted by his failures. He walked out quietly, closing the door behind him. The sound was soft, yet in his heart it roared like thunder. When Diep returned from the market, the house was still. James, she called. Once, twice. Only the clock replied. Then she saw it, the envelope. Her hands trembled as she opened it, the daisy slipping gently onto the floor. My dear Diep, if one day you wake up and I'm gone, please don't think I stopped loving you. I'm leaving so that you and Nhi can live without worry, without the weight of my failures. I've lost too much, but the one thing I did right was loving you both. When all this is over, if I'm still worthy, I'll find my way home. James. She fell to her knees, clutching the letter to her chest. Mommy, where's Uncle James? Nhi asked, tugging at her sleeve. Diep could only whisper, through tears, he'll come back. He promised. Miles away, James was already on the road. He wasn't chasing success anymore, he was chasing redemption. The city lights stretched out again, but this time they looked cold, indifferent. The brilliance he once admired now felt hollow. The first weeks were the hardest. He lived in a small, damp room on the edge of the city, where the ceiling cracked and the rain leaked through. Every night he lay awake, hearing echoes of their laughter. Finding work was nearly impossible. Once hailed as a visionary, he was now dismissed as overqualified, unstable, a risk. Maybe he was. But James refused to give up, not out of pride, but out of love. One rainy morning, he found work at a construction site. It was hard, grueling labor, hauling bricks, mixing cement, wiping sweat that burned his eyes. But each drop of sweat was a prayer, a promise to be better. During breaks, he would sit on a pile of sand, pull out a worn photo of Diep and Nhi, and whisper, I'm still here. Still trying. Back home, Diep worked long hours too. She sold handmade crafts at the market, saving every coin. Nhi missed him terribly. Each night, she would tape her drawings of the three of them beside her bed. So Daddy won't forget us, she said sleepily. Diep never corrected her. She never blamed James, never cursed his absence. She only prayed for his strength, for his safety, for his return. Months passed. One evening, as James finished work, his boss approached him. You're a hard worker, Lou. We're opening a new branch, need someone trustworthy to manage it. You interested? James froze. After everything, the humiliation, the struggle, someone finally believed in him again. That night, he walked to the city bridge. The river below shimmered with reflected light. For the first time in a long while, he smiled. He took out his phone and typed a message he had drafted 100 times before. Diep, I'm okay. I'm working again. I miss you and NHI every day. I'll come home when I can stand tall beside you again. He pressed send. Miles away, Diep's phone lit up. She read the message once, then again. Tears welled in her eyes, but this time, they were tears of hope. I knew you wouldn't give up, she whispered. Outside, the rain stopped. The night air was clean again. When the day finally came for James to return home, the city was wrapped in mist. He packed a small suitcase, just a few shirts, the old photograph, and the courage he had rebuilt piece by piece. He wasn't the same man who had left. He had learned to live with less, to find strength in effort, and to understand that true success wasn't built on wealth, but on love. The bus ride home felt endless. Every passing field brought back memories: Diep's laughter, Nhi's giggles, the golden light that used to pour through their kitchen window. When he stepped off at the small village station, the air smelled of wet soil and smoke from evening fires. He stood still for a moment, just breathing it in. He was home. As he walked down the narrow dirt path, he saw smoke curling from their chimney. The old gate creaked open, just as before. NHI was sitting in the yard, trying to tie a red ribbon in her hair. When she looked up, her eyes widened, she froze. Then screamed with joy. Daddy! She ran toward him, stumbling, laughing, crying all at once. James knelt and caught her in his arms, holding her as if he could never let go again. Diep appeared at the doorway, her hands still dusted with flour. For a moment, she just stood there, tears streaming down her face. James looked up. I'm sorry, he whispered. For leaving. For everything. Diep walked to him, her steps slow but certain. She touched his face, smiling through her tears. You didn't leave, she said softly. You just took the long way home. That evening, they sat together at the old wooden table. Diep had cooked his favorite meal, nothing extravagant, just rice, vegetables, and soup that tasted like peace. The oil lamp flickered gently, casting their shadows across the wall. James looked at them, his family, and realized something profound. He had once lost everything: his company, his wealth, his pride. But in losing all that, he had found what truly mattered. Love, family, peace. He took Diep's hand. I may have failed as a businessman, he said, but I'll never fail as your husband, or as Nhi's father. Diep smiled through tears. That's all we ever needed. Outside, the stars shimmered quietly over their little house. It wasn't a mansion, but it was filled with laughter, warmth, and light. And that, James thought, was more than enough. James once believed success meant applause, the admiration of others, the comfort of luxury, the proof that he mattered. But when the applause faded, when the empire crumbled, what remained was the truth he had long avoided. Success is empty when it stands alone. Love gives it meaning. Through failure, he found grace. Through distance, he found devotion. And through love, he found his way home.